So my name is Ernest. I'm a director, and so I produced and directed this documentary called SE8. It's a documentary about Deptford Flea Market. Stylistically, it's mostly just interviews of the people actually working there, and as well of customers. I went to med film school. I did the MA there, and then I made my grad film, which was kind of a surreal horror slash comedy called Clean Your Room. And then after that, I think like every film school grad, I was a little bit lost. I didn't really know what the next project was. Wasn't really sure how to get to the next project, I think. And so this was probably the first real project I did from start to finish after that, which was like probably, yeah, started over a year after I graduated. So February 2024.
So I know you as a surrealist narrative filmmaker. You just mentioned your excellent film, Clean Your Room, which I was very grateful to work on as a composer and sound designer. I would like to know what made you dip your toes into documentary.
Sure. Actually, that's actually a good question. I was thinking about it on the way here. Like, why did I make a documentary? I think, well, first of all, like, I think a lot of my favorite films are surreal documentaries in a way. Like, for example, like Sans Soleil or like Close Up by Abbas Kiarostami. I think they're films that kind of play on that line between the real subject they're like documenting and also kind of have a surreal feel to them and operate kind of in the imaginary as well, I think. Maybe that can kind of be seen in that documentary, that these are maybe my influences. After a year that I really wanted to get back into film, and I thought documentary was quite an easy way in that it would be easy to start doing it because there's not that much preparation you need for a documentary, especially one which is on the flea market right next to my house. So I thought it would be kind of easy as well. I saw a lot of people around me do documentaries, so yeah, why not try that?
The documentary is a stark depiction of the death of market culture in London and Britain as a whole. Yeah. How did you approach this topic and why did it resonate with you?
So, I think like when I started it, I honestly had no idea about the death of market culture or anything about that, to be honest. But I was definitely interested in the community aspect of that place, and that place being somewhere I was attached to in that I lived there, basically, was kind of interesting to me. All of that kind of came, well, basically as soon as we started interviewing people, because the first person we interviewed was that guy who's basically telling you that everything's gone to shit now. So yeah, from the start, that was a theme that just kind of kept coming back up when we were interviewing people.
The production of any documentary is a daunting task, as you must engage with the general public whilst also forming a narrative to present an effective film. How was the production process for you, and what were some of the pitfalls whilst creating this work?
The pre-production and production in a way was quite, I wouldn't say it was easy because obviously I'd never really interviewed anyone before, so I think that was quite a big challenge. Camera-wise, I was really lucky, like both Akash and Susie did like an amazing job for it. I didn't really direct them that much in that regard, I think. I selected some of the B-roll. I told them to film some of the stuff. We kind of worked on framing the interviews as well, but they were very independent in the way they work, which I think is something I quite like when I work with people, is for them to basically take the initiative on their own. And I think they both did a really, really good job at that. But I would say the production process was kind of like easier than post-production, because as you said, that's when you really construct the narrative and just have all this footage and don't really know what to do with it. First, I had to like organize the footage, and I kind of did that thematically, which I think you can kind of see in the documentary, in that it's not like interviews following each other. They're more themes going after another and kind of progressing towards that ending. And then I kind of structured that almost like an essay. Like I was like, okay, part one, we're going to have this scene. Part two, we're going to have this. Part three, we're going to have this. And I did that first cut and then forgot about it, to be honest. And a few months later, I watched it and I was like, yeah, this is not good. And I kind of just, after that, I just started editing it. And every edit, I was like, okay, these are the problems. I realized later that there were some that just tells the story that really came out, which is, as you said, like, or the end of like market culture. And I think more globally, it's like gentrification really, and the end of community spaces, like the erasure of community spaces in favor of like those really corporate spaces. So for that to come out, I had to go out and film some other stuff, which is like the B-roll at the end, basically, that you see is stuff I filmed in December last year.
The culture of Deptford is discussed in this film. Did you feel that culture whilst making the film, and how did you approach visualizing that culture?
I think Deptford's kind of like the start of South London in a way, and you can kind of see that in the really like stark contrast of people who go there, which I think you really see in the contrast between who the customers are and who the sellers are. The customers are young, usually kind of artsy types, whereas the sellers are long established people who have been there for years and who are kind of progressively getting priced out of their own area, both in terms of their living situation, but as you see in the documentary, kind of in their work as well. And so how I approach that visually, I think you can kind of see the contrast with just the interviews and kind of the succession of interviews, the contrast between what they're saying essentially. Then it was with the editing, with that ending, with that beginning, kind of like, really wanting to reinforce that through the editing and kind of the more surreal moments maybe in the film.
Your documentary is a portrait which harbors a systemic bleakness experienced by these communities. Was that something you were aiming to demonstrate? And what are your thoughts on it now after the film has been completed?
Yeah, it was definitely something I was aiming to demonstrate in the edit. Well, the bleakness was quite apparent just from the content itself, really. And I think between the first and the second edit, like, I really thought I needed to accentuate that to really show the bleak side of it. So yeah, it was definitely something I'd set out to do.
Your previous work, Clean Your Room, centers very solely on a particular individual.
Yeah.
And that individual's journey, even though there are extra characters around that influence that journey, it's very much centered on them.
Yeah.
They take up a lot of the screen. Do you find it, as a creator yourself, easier to engage in films that require just the focus on one particular performance, or would you like to eventually branch out and try and do something which encapsulates more personas? But what's your opinion now?
Eventually, I would like to. I think, well, I don't know what my next project will be, so it's kind of hard to know what I want to in the future. But I think as it's kind of a global process as an artist, in that you start by making films that are really personal to you and about yourself, and then I think you kind of move out. I think after a while, you kind of explore the world more. You kind of understand others more. I think maybe that second film there's less of me in that second film, even though there's only one actor, if that makes sense. I think all three, like the documentary, Clean Your Room, and especially that short film, are about the disintegration of the individual, of the self, and kind of trying to reconstruct yourself through that. I think if I had to sum up what the last short film is about, it's definitely the best way to sum it up, I think.
Your documentary is about the community. And in the documentary, you deal with the lack of representation of the market, the lack of publicity.
Yeah.
So with your film, the documentary centers so much about the people and their drive to be noticed. How do you think, and how do you want your film to grow and engage the local community and get people to come back? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm really, really glad you asked that, because that's basically what motivated me to finish that project. And for me, finishing a project is actually quite hard. What motivated me was that guy saying, like, I really think you should make this, because in a few years, markets like this will be finished, basically. And I don't know if this documentary is really going to make any publicity. I hope people will visit it after watching it. But I think it's also kind of almost archival footage in a way, in that if it does disappear, like, at least there'll be something to make it live on. And I think that's where I say I don't think my work is super important, but I'd say that's where the importance of my work is, yeah.
What advice would you give to other young filmmakers pursuing the same goal?
Sure.
What advice?
Go on film sets, but don't go on film sets to to work in the film industry. I'd say go on film sets to make contacts that can then work on your films. SE8, I had some help from a documentary director where I was working as a sound recordist, for whom I was working as a sound recordist. That new short film, my DP, Thomas, I met on a film set as well. One thing. The other thing is, I think, figure out what you like talking about, or what you like to make things about. I think in the time between Clean Your Room and the documentary, I did a lot of just writing, like probably more like, I wouldn't even call them short stories, like just like kind of what came up to my head after one pint, basically. And I would honestly recommend people do that and just kind of figure out what they like, what they want to say, and then work with people who like and want to say the same things. And I don't think you can go that wrong with that.